Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Ross. I'm a neuroscientist and founder of a 501c3 research institute called Impact Network. We're dedicated to improving marijuana policy and accelerating cannabinoid therapeutics. I'm not only a researcher, but I'm a fibromyalgia patient who uses cannabis and has coached thousands of clients across the country and the world in how to use cannabis as a healing medicine. So today I'm going to share some of my secrets and some of the science behind cannabis as a preventative medicine. So a little disclaimer first. I'm not a medical doctor and this is not medical advice. These statements I'm going to talk about are not evaluated by the FDA, so please discuss any medical conditions and any of the content in this talk with your doctor. Again, we want you to be honest with your doctor about using cannabis or potentially using cannabis because everything that you put in your body really should be disclosed to your healthcare provider. So a little bit about what this talk is going to cover. We're going to talk about what the endocannabinoid system is. We're going to talk about causes of endocannabinoid deficiency and what endocannabinoid deficiency is. We're going to talk about the treatment of endocannabinoid deficiency. Then I'm going to share a little case study about using cannabis to prevent cancer. That's a concept that not a lot of people have touched on, and I hope will be really, really interesting for you as many patients, and almost 1 in 2 patients will develop cancer in their lifetime. Finally, the last case study is going to be navigating menopause with cannabis. Again, menopause is something 50% of our population, or all women, will actually reach. So these are topics that hopefully apply to almost anyone watching this talk. So first off, let me introduce the endocannabinoid system. So cannabis, you may have heard of curing or healing so many conditions, from cancer to fibromyalgia to attention deficit disorder, depression, brain damage, chronic pain, diabetes. It's almost so overwhelming, it's unbelievable. But there's a real reason why cannabis can treat so many things, and that's because your body makes natural endocannabinoids that are very similar to the phytocannabinoids or plant cannabinoids found in plants like marijuana. So if cannabis can treat so many of these conditions because it's mimicking a natural plant, your natural endocannabinoids, well, what is cannabis possibly replacing? Well, there's this concept called endocannabinoid deficiency, and it's based on the fact that your endocannabinoids actually activate different receptors in your body and brain called cannabinoid receptors. So these are called CB1 and CB2 receptors. They're found in different places across your body. CB1 receptors are found throughout the body and brain, while CB2 receptors are mostly found in the immune system, although they're also found in the brain. You have these natural endocannabinoids, the main ones being anandamide and 2-AG. These endocannabinoids also can bind to your CB1 and CB2 receptors, and these create a whole bunch of different physiological processes, from feeling pain relief to increasing appetite. Your endocannabinoid system regulates so many different functions that that is a whole nother talk in itself. The plant cannabinoids like THC or CBD activate different cannabinoid receptors. THC actually activates both your CB1 and CB2 receptors, but CBD actually doesn't activate either of those receptors, and what it does is actually increase the natural levels of your own endocannabinoids. So it increases levels of anandamide, which then bind to your CB1 and CB2 receptors. So in a normal, healthy person, you have high levels of your receptors, you have normal levels of these endocannabinoids, and they're binding to your receptors, and things are happening in a regular way in your cell and in your body, in your brain, and everything's in balance. But what happens when certain pieces of the system are not working, or they're broken, or there are not enough of these receptors or these endocannabinoids? Well, you might have an endocannabinoid deficiency. So clinical endocannabinoid deficiency was not a concept I created. I have to give all the credit to Dr. Ethan Russo, who coined the term in 2003. Now, when we think about endocannabinoid deficiency, it was sort of a novel concept back then to think that we might not make enough of our endogenous marijuana-like compounds. But it makes sense from a neuroscience point of view because we have lots of deficiencies. When you don't make enough dopamine in your brain, you can end up with a syndrome such as Parkinson's disease. When you don't make enough serotonin, you may end up with depression. And in fact, how most antidepressants work, including Prozac, is by elevating serotonin levels in your brain. When we look at Alzheimer's disease, what's the root cause of that? It's acetylcholine deficiency. So again, all these pharmaceutical drugs or treatments actually target this deficiency and bring those levels up to normal. So it would make sense that there might be some diseases that are linked to endocannabinoid deficiency, and they either require raising our own natural endocannabinoid levels up to normal or require an exogenous substance like cannabis or THC or CBD or any of those other cannabinoids to actually bring our normal function of our endocannabinoid system back to normal. So clinical endocannabinoid deficiency has actually been linked to several different types of conditions. In fact, migraine, headache is one, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel disease, or IBD. That's not to be confused with irritable bowel syndrome. So irritable bowel disease includes Crohn and ulcerative colitis. Endometriosis is actually the newest disease that has been linked to endocannabinoid deficiency, and that's actually a condition I suffer from. And I can tell you that cannabis definitely does treat the symptoms of this chronic pelvic pain condition. While we don't know all the conditions that endocannabinoid deficiency is linked to, it's possible that there actually may be many conditions. In fact, every condition may be linked to endocannabinoid deficiency. Why is that? Well, the endocannabinoid system is actually your largest neurotransmitter system, and it regulates all the other neurotransmitters. So think of all the diseases that are linked to imbalances in brain chemicals. And if the endocannabinoid system is the root of that, really treating that root problem, that endocannabinoid system deficiency or imbalance, might be able to help all diseases. So just to frame that again, many diseases are complex, and yet they affect so much of our population, and not one drug is able to treat all the different varieties or subtypes of these conditions. For example, depression, right? There's a whole pharmacy box of different drugs that we use to treat depression. But it actually could be an endocannabinoid deficiency, and targeting it with cannabis or other products might actually be able to treat depression better than current pharmaceuticals or antidepressants, whether they're serotonin targeted, epinephrine targeted, or dopamine targeted. We also have those issues of pelvic pain. I mean, 84% of women have pelvic pain, and 25% have chronic pelvic pain, and many of those cases aren't treated by traditional medications. These women are just left without an option because the endocannabinoid system has not been explored as a therapeutic target. The same thing happens with migraine. We have almost 20% of women experiencing migraine headache, and yet pharmaceutical interventions targeting the endocannabinoid system have not been developed or available yet for women with migraine headache, even though migraine has been established as a disorder linked to endocannabinoid deficiency. So if we're thinking about running on our endocannabinoid systems running on empty, and how unhealthy the entire population is, especially in America, we have this horrible Western diet, we're all achy, we're irritable, we feel run down, we're just popping pills left and right. It's possible that a lot of us are actually endocannabinoid deficient. There's no way for us to tell right now because there's no commercial blood test for anandamide levels. Again, that endogenous endocannabinoid, that really is the main readout for endocannabinoid deficiency. It's not as easy as just getting a vitamin D blood test. But what if it was? We would be able to identify how many people are endocannabinoid deficient and actually make policies or target doctor treatments to raising those levels and bringing us back to health. So the fact that over 25% of Americans have a condition that is linked to clinical endocannabinoid deficiency should raise some red flags. In a similar manner, over 75% of Americans were identified at one point as vitamin D deficient. And this is despite government guidelines suggesting that vitamin D deficiency is not widespread and we don't need to worry about it. Then researchers actually did the science and found out that the government was not exactly telling the truth. And if you know anything about marijuana, legalization and marijuana research in this country, we know that the government does not always tell us the truth about things that should be making us healthy. So hopefully more research will let us know who is endocannabinoid deficient in our country. So how do you become endocannabinoid deficient? And again, big words. I'm going to try to break this down into much simpler pieces so you can understand why you might become endocannabinoid deficient or someone you love might be. So a little bit of science here. So there's a couple ways you might become endocannabinoid deficient. Well, first off, you might not produce any of these endocannabinoids. So if you have a gene whose job is to produce the proteins that turn into endocannabinoids, if that gene is turned off for some reason, you just don't make anandamide or you don't make 2-AG. You also might break down these endocannabinoids too fast. And in fact, there's enzymes. One's called Fa that breaks down anandamide. Another one is called Magol, and that breaks down 2-AG. If you have too much of these enzymes, or these enzymes are working too fast to break apart these endocannabinoids, they're not going to be active, they're not going to be working, and you're going to have endocannabinoid deficiency. On the flip side, when you have an endocannabinoid, it has to fit into that lock, that cannabinoid receptor, that CB1 or CB2 receptor. Well, what happens if you have enough anandamide, but you don't have enough of the receptor? So the anandamide is just floating around, it has nowhere to connect with, no door to unlock. Well, that could happen when the genes that produce the cannabinoid receptors are turned off. And in fact, the CB1 receptor, its gene is called CNR1. And the CB2 receptor, its gene is called CNR2. And so you do have cases where mutations in genes can actually make the CNR1 or CNR2 gene ineffective and not able to produce enough of these cannabinoid receptors. The final way that you might be able to have an endocannabinoid deficiency is if you have enough of the endocannabinoids, you have enough of the receptors, and they even are able to match up and unlock that pathway that's supposed to make a physiological process happen. But you have your key, you have your door, but nothing's happening past the door. So the downstream signaling is just not working. And so you're not causing eating, you're not causing mood changes, you're not causing activity changes, just nothing's happening. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the human body, and the endocannabinoid system is no different. So to get really nerdy here, we're going to be talking about mutations. And these mutations are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. A SNP is just, again, a one amino acid change in your DNA, in that gene, that can change how the protein is read out. And so genes are basically recipes. And so when they're read correctly, they make the right protein. So if you have a gene for a cannabinoid receptor, it's read properly, it makes a CB1 receptor. But if there's something wrong in that code, it might make a funky cannabinoid receptor. It may not be in the right shape. It may not be able to fit anandamide into that, as a key into that lock. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. It might not make the protein at all. So these SNPs happen at a very common rate in the human genome, or our collection of DNA. And so mutations happen all the time. Some of them are there for our benefit. Some of them are not so good. And so these SNPs actually can change how we respond to both our natural endocannabinoids and cannabis. I'll give some examples here. I don't want to get too nerdy for you guys, but there are several endocannabinoid genes. Again, you have that gene called Fa that actually makes the enzyme that breaks down your endocannabinoids. And there have been mutations identified that actually can be good for your endocannabinoid system. We talked about endocannabinoid deficiency, but there's actually, I would say, an abundance of endocannabinoids, which can have a very different effect. In fact, there were several studies produced some years ago talking about people that might be happier might have more endocannabinoids because they have a mutation in a gene that makes more of that anandamide. And in fact, 33% of our population actually has an abundance of anandamide, at least at the genetic level. We don't know what happens, due to their lifestyle choices that might actually bring those levels down, but from birth on down, at least their cards are not stacked against them. A CNR1 mutation is a mutation in the gene that codes for CB1 receptors, that cannabinoid receptor type 1. There are a ton of available mutations in this gene. And so researchers have actually looked at this and found out which mutations in those genes might affect whether you're happy, whether you become a drug addict, whether you become an alcoholic, whether you might be more prone to schizophrenia or depression or anxiety. There's even other mutations, not SNPs, but we're talking about multiple mutations in a row that are linked to multiple sclerosis, which is a neurodegenerative disease, which is very responsive to cannabis. And it's also associated with reduced cannabinoid receptors. So here we have a potential cause of why cannabis might be very useful for a disease. Then we have some rarer mutations. For example, there's a FOD2 mutation, but very few people have this. And in fact, if you have 2 copies of this mutation, you'll die. So we just don't have a lot of cases looking at that mutation. On the cannabinoid receptor 2 side, we do, again, have tons of mutations that have been identified, and they're associated with non-functioning or fewer cannabinoid receptors. And these mutations in the CB2 receptor have been linked to alcoholism, depression, schizophrenia, and osteoporosis, which interestingly later I'll show that osteoporosis is also responsive to cannabis treatment. So it's really interesting. We are seeing a potential cause and effect or linkage about why cannabis might be helpful for these conditions because they're actually treating a genetic mutation that is in the patient. So some risk factors for endocannabinoid deficiency, I'm not going to go into this very deeply, but as we age, there has been preclinical evidence, at least in rats, that the number of CB2 receptors and possibly CB1 receptors we have goes down in number. So we're going to have a natural endocannabinoid deficiency as we get older. Interestingly, there's a lot of diseases we think of diseases of aging that affect the brain, like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Imagine if these diseases are just caused by endocannabinoid deficiency. We don't have enough downstream signaling to actually protect our brain, and our brain starts going haywire. We start creating amyloid proteins that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. We can't clear out things that are sort of making our brain not function properly and causing cognitive issues. A similar thing happens with women after menopause. We're more likely to have Parkinson's and Alzheimer's after menopause, which is that time where we basically have a huge estrogen drop, our monthly cycle stops, and we're more prone for osteoporosis and a whole bunch of things. Estrogen and anandamide levels are actually linked, so when estrogen goes down, anandamide can go down. And so it's possible that women, especially post-menopausal women, have a natural endocannabinoid deficiency, and restoring that deficiency might make their brain and their body feeling more optimal and back to those premenopausal levels. Lifestyle. The Western lifestyle is horrific. Again, I think that the Western lifestyle is probably the primary cause of endocannabinoid deficiency in our country. Our diet, we're eating fried food. Most Americans don't even eat more than 1 vegetable or fruit a day. So we're just not eating antioxidants. So our bodies are full of chemicals. I don't see how that could be helpful for providing optimal endocannabinoid system synthesis or for its maintenance and functions. For example, you actually need proper levels of omega 3s and 6s to produce the building blocks of endocannabinoids. So if you don't get these fatty acids from sources like fish, you might not even be able to make your own endocannabinoids. So you could really be running on empty. And think of how many Americans don't even eat fish or don't like it, or they'll eat fried fish, which is pretty much negating all the effects of eating their omega fatty acids. You also have medications. There are medications that can actually lower your endocannabinoid system function, partly because they might actually bind to your endocannabinoids and make them non-functional or prevent them from binding to the cannabinoid receptors. You also have chronic stress. Who isn't stressed out? I mean, I'm stressed out right now, right? We're all stressed out, and stress in the endocannabinoid system is pretty linked. Temporary stress, like, oh, I'm excited, I'm gonna go play this, football game, or I'm gonna go take my exam. That's helpful stress, but chronic stress is when you're stressed out every day. You hate your job, or you're in a bad relationship, or something is not right. Chronic stress will actually burn out the mechanisms that support an healthy endocannabinoid system, and you might not make enough endocannabinoids, or you might do something where the cannabinoid receptors are not properly expressed. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're chronically stressed. If you look at PTSD, or post-traumatic syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD is linked to a completely non-functional endocannabinoid system, and the endocannabinoid system is important for helping you forget. So chronic stress beats the hell out of your endocannabinoid system, and because the US is a workaholic country that does not work on its self-care, I think that we have a lot of people in the US that definitely are at risk for endocannabinoid deficiency. So how do we treat this problem? If everyone is endocannabinoid deficient, I guess we have some work to do. Well, first off, doctors and other healthcare providers really need to provide tools for diagnosing endocannabinoid deficiency. Again, if you're depressed, your doctor might run a blood test to see whether you have proper vitamin D levels, or you have proper vitamin B12 levels. Can a doctor really write the same test to test your anandamide levels? Not necessarily. Thankfully, some people are trying to push for commercial anandamide blood tests, but I think that's about 1 or 2 years off. It does exist in academic labs. There are some groups also that offer genetic testing. For example, there's groups like Cortigen, Only You Genetics, and some other groups. 23andMe also tests some of the endocannabinoid system genes. And this is important, especially if you have a chronic disease. I mean, epilepsy can be associated with dysfunction in several genes, including the endocannabinoid system genes, addiction. There's also autoimmune disorders that will likely come up as we do more research, as mutations in the endocannabinoid system. And in fact, actually, Crohn's disease has been linked to mutations in the CB1 and CB2 receptor. And Crohn's disease is a GI disorder that is very sensitive to cannabis. So as we get more sophisticated in tools to understand the genetics of our endocannabinoid system, we're also going to be able to link, why does cannabis work for this disease? Oh, there's a mutation in this. But it's going to be, I would say we're about 5 to 10 years from using this in every single practice across the country. But if you do have a serious condition, it might be something to read up about. There is a healthy citizen science community out there. Groups like Life Extension have been doing it for years, where people try to figure out what is wrong with them. They order their own blood tests. You have to be careful, and you definitely want to seek the advice of a healthcare professional. But you also should take control of your own health and ask those questions to understand yourself better, so that you can make a good informed choice of whether cannabis might be right for you. So how might you treat endocannabinoid deficiency? So I wrote a book with 4 steps of how you might be able to treat and prevent endocannabinoid deficiency. The first step is really elimination. You got to get rid of those lifestyle factors, those diet factors, medication factors that are harming your endocannabinoid system. And I say when somebody has, a horrible sleep hygiene, horrible diet, they're just stressed out all the time, there's no yoga in their life, there's no exercise in their life, there's nothing happening to make them feel even like a normal human being. Slapping cannabis on there is just sort of like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole wound. I mean, you're still gonna be bleeding, so we expect cannabis to make miracles, and sometimes you're too sick for the cannabis to even work. If you're so sick, for example, that your cannabinoid receptors aren't even expressed on the cells you're trying to treat, and this does even happen with some late stage 4 cancers, the cannabis can't help you. It can only do so much. It might not be able to get rid of all your pain, it's just a little bit of pain. Or it might be able to reduce some of the inflammation, but the fact that you're eating, 100% junk food diet and smoking cigarettes and doing drugs, you can't overcome all of those problems and all of those dings to your health by just introducing cannabis. So first off, you gotta get rid of all the junk and really commit to a healthy lifestyle. Secondly, you really wanna unlock your endocannabinoid genes. This step we call priming. We're gonna add those diet and lifestyle factors that help promote healthy endocannabinoid system function. And you may have seen a lot of people espousing the benefits of cannabis and massage, or cannabis and meditation, and cannabis and yoga. It's not all woo-woo. There's actually benefits to this, and I will say this as somebody who has never held a tree pose for more than 2 minutes. Under the influence of cannabis, you can actually become more active. You may have the motivation to go exercise longer, commit to it, and actually enjoy it. A lot of times working out or spending any time on ourselves isn't very fun. But cannabis can help us be able to commit to a long-term health or an exercise program, or at least self-care program. Again, even 5 minutes of meditation a day is going to help you relax and reduce those stress levels. And those stress levels are what you need. You need low stress levels to support your healthy endocannabinoid system. So I actually skipped ahead to step 3, and it's really stress management, but all these things factor into that. You have physiological stress that's caused by the poor diet you eat. You have physical and emotional stress. If you're beating your body by working too hard at a labor job, you're gonna cause physical stress. You can get emotional stress from being in bad relationships, or not enjoying your life, or just being burnt out in general. So if you can modulate that stress and keep it to a minimum, you're going to be able to support all that work you're doing to try to bring back your endocannabinoid system levels to normal. And finally, after you do those first three steps, I really then support adding cannabis in, because once your body is ready to receive it, it's gonna have the most benefits. You're not gonna have to blow the bank on spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month on 1,000 milligrams of CBD, when in fact your body is now healthy enough where you could put, say, 25 milligrams of CBD in it, and it's gonna have the same effects that it would have if you had used 1,000 milligrams of CBD, but you were on a junk food, horrible sleep patterns, and no exercise lifestyle. And so I really think that in order for a patient to really get and reap all the benefits of cannabis or CBD products, you really have to commit to a lifestyle change. And it doesn't have to be everything, and it doesn't have to be all at once. You can take it slow, you can take it on your time, but it is so important that you be cognizant of that this is just one of the tools in your toolbox, in your home pharmacy, that can help you live the best life you can live. And it's gonna take a team of doctors. It's gonna take genetic tests, lifestyle. There's gonna be a lot of factors that go into what's perfect for you, and it really is personalized medicine. There is no one regimen that is right for you and everyone else across the United States. You are special. And cannabis there's gonna be certain things that work only for you. And it may take some time to get there and identify what those treatments are, or how it fits best into your life, your work, and your relationships. And also, depending on what location you live in. We also have to realize that cannabis isn't legal everywhere, and no matter how beneficial it might be for you, we do suggest that you don't use cannabis in a state where it's not legal yet, because again, going to jail is never a healthy thing. So respect laws, respect your body, respect your lifestyle, but at the end of the day, respect yourself, and hopefully you'll take that journey onto cannabis in a healthy endocannabinoid system. So there are a multitude of ways to use cannabis. I mean, I could talk probably for like 5 hours on this. I have a little show and tell box, but I didn't bring it this time. But you can smoke cannabis. That's a form where you combust cannabis. You actually produce ammonia, so that's not my favorite type of consumption for patients. It's a very recreational manner, but if you're a sick patient, you shouldn't be breathing in toxins that we also associate with cigarette smoking. Vaporizing is a great way to use cannabis because you don't get those toxins like ammonia. Edibles are a good way to consume a lot of THC or CBD or other cannabinoids you're looking to get. It could be in a drink, it can be in food, it could be in butter that you mix into food. If you are a very sick patient, I always suggest that you want to limit your sugar. So definitely don't go after things like brownies or cookies if you're trying to lose weight, or if you're a cancer patient, or if you're autoimmune, you want to go for a gluten-free or other healthy type of edible instead of going for, again, the brownie. That there's no amount of cannabis that's going to help you choose a brownie over, say, a gluten-free item that you're actually supposed to be eating. Tinctures and sprays. We can drop cannabis under our tongues, and that actually gets absorbed straight into our system much faster than an edible does. And there are reasons why you might want to get into your bloodstream faster and avoid the liver, because not all of us have healthy livers. Some of us are so sick that our liver doesn't even really work. Others of us have a liver that's very healthy and breaks down things too fast. For example, some of us convert THC into a much more active form of THC that can make us feel a lot more high or spacey, and we want to avoid that first pass metabolism through the liver through forms like tinctures or suppositories or patches, or a whole bunch of things that you can talk to a cannabis health coach or a healthcare provider for more information on. Pills, again, are something that we're so familiar with. You've got capsules, you've got tablets, lots of different ways to take cannabis or single cannabinoids. You have topicals. These are creams that, depending on where you put them, might not get absorbed into your system. However, we do have veins, so keep in mind if you take a THC cream and you apply it somewhere where veins are very close to the surface, you actually might absorb some THC in your bloodstream, and you might feel high, or you might fail a drug test for THC. So keep in mind, if you keep it on places where veins are not very clearly exposed, you should be fine for a drug test. Otherwise, proceed with caution. If you're a fibromyalgia patient like me and you're putting it all over your hands and feet, you might get it into your bloodstream. Patches. You may have heard that it's good to put patches with THC to relieve pain on things like your butt or where the pain is. That's not good. It's not going to get into your system that way. Patches usually don't penetrate deep in enough to help when it's applied to the source of the pain. It's actually much better to put it again on a veiny area so that the cannabinoids are actually getting into your bloodstream, where they're going to help relieve pain or spasms or whatever you're using it for. And then the more taboo part of cannabis, but actually really helpful for very chronically ill patients, is rectal or vaginal suppositories. And again, that's going up a different way, a different route, depending on what your goal is. We definitely have women that are treating pelvic pain with vaginal suppositories. And this actually helps reduce first pass metabolism. So the THC is not going through the liver, it's getting absorbed very locally to where you need it to go, and that can be pretty amazing for a patient. They're also able to tolerate a lot more higher doses of THC that might make them super high if they ate them, but when they're used as a suppository, instead they're able to tolerate it quite well, and most patients actually do not get high from suppositories. So cancer prevention using cannabis. Most of the time you hear about using cannabis to treat cancer, but I'm going to talk about what we do to prevent cancer if you have a high risk for cancer, it's in your family, or you took some genetic tests and you realize, oh my God, I'm definitely going to get breast cancer, what might you be able to do with cannabis to see if you can lower your risk in the future? So first off, I want to show that raw cannabinoids are really an exciting form of cannabis, and we're talking about THCA or CBDA. These are the forms of that are actually produced in the plant. Your cannabis plant or your hemp plant does not produce THC or CBD. It produces these raw cannabinoids, and it actually takes decarboxylating or heating up these cannabinoids to turn them from THCA to THC or CBDA to CBD. What's really cool about THCA is that it's not really psychoactive, and it's definitely not as psychoactive as THC. So it has a whole bunch of different roles. It's actually more effective at reducing nausea and vomiting, and it's very anti-inflammatory. It also stimulates appetite, similar to THC, without, again, any of that psychoactivity. So I'm really excited about raw cannabinoids, and I'm really excited about their role in cancer prevention. So one thing is, if you look at the literature and you see how raw cannabinoids function, CBDA is actually a COX-2 inhibitor. And COX-2 inhibitors are something you might have heard of. So NSAIDs are drugs on the market that actually help reduce inflammation and pain. There are certain ones that target COX-1, and there are certain ones that target COX-2. The COX-2 inhibitors are much more potent at reducing pain and inflammation, and in fact, there's a popular drug called Celebrex, which got a horrible rap because it was used and then found out to cause a whole bunch of heart problems and heart attacks. So it was very potent at inhibiting COX-2, but too potent. Here, CBDA is a less potent version of a COX-2 inhibitor and is plant-based. So I have a lot of hope that it may act in a very, very similar way to Celebrex in terms of preventing cancer. I mean, Celebrex has been looked at in prostate cancer and breast cancer, colon cancer trials to actually prevent those types of cancers in at-risk patients. But again, you can't use a drug if it's going to cause a heart attack. We didn't get cancer, but we got a heart attack. That's not helpful. And we see a lot of these bad side effects with pharmaceuticals. If CBDA can be a much more gentler COX-2 inhibitor, and actually we could put patients that we know might get colon or breast cancer on raw CBD for several years and see whether or not they develop breast cancer or colon cancer or prostate cancer. There seems to be very minimal risk with that, and that's something as a researcher we're really excited about exploring, but we just don't have the data yet. The other exciting thing is that CBDA in preclinical studies has been shown to inhibit the migration of human breast cancer cells. So here we have this theory that this is how it might work as a COX-2 inhibitor, but we actually now have preclinical data that suggests that CBDA, again, raw CBD, could prevent the spread of breast cancer cells. And if you know anything about cancer, we all have cancer because we all have mutations in our cells. We're not perfect. The human body is not perfect, and our DNA repair mechanisms are not perfect. And so we all have cells that are a little wonky, and it takes these cells that are wonky somehow surviving and growing, and then finally we detect them and we go, okay, we have a breast cancer lump, right? Imagine instead that we don't have to wait the 10 years to be able to detect that breast cancer lump, and we go, okay, we all have cancer, so let's just freeze it. Let's just freeze those cancer cells and prevent them from growing. Let's make an anti-cancer environment in our own bodies by ingesting these raw cannabinoids. I actually see a future where we don't have cancer, where we don't have breast cancer, where we're not treating breast cancer patients and trying to prevent their recurrence. I don't want to see a world where there's any more pink ribbons. I want to see a world where we don't get cancer and we live our life to the fullest, quality of life, no hospitals, no sickness. This world may be possible with using cannabinoids as prevention for cancer, but we're just at the start, and there's so much for us to learn, but it's very, very exciting. And finally, I do want to touch on endocannabinoid deficiency possibly being a cause of cancer. We're seeing more and more cancer cases, unfortunately, and thankfully, due to more progressive treatments, we are seeing a lot of cancer survivors. But who wants to be a cancer survivor? I mean, that has its own whole laundry list of symptoms that you have to deal with for the rest of your life, and including many cancer patients don't choose cannabis. They go through chemotherapy. So we have a whole bunch of people surviving chemotherapy, and that's just not a nice process. What if instead we could counsel people to boost their own endocannabinoid levels as sort of a buffer or a shield to basically ward off cancer? I think that if daily use of CBD and or CBDA could promote our antioxidant functions, it could reduce inflammation, it could boost our anandamide levels, and it might reduce our breast cancer risk and other risks of cancer. Again, much more research is needed, but these are exciting things that we can study with future funding for clinical cannabis research. And just to reiterate, 1 in 2 people will develop cancer during their lifetime. This is a huge target market. If we can identify which patients respond better to cannabis or which patients respond better to prophylactic cannabinoid treatment to prevent incidence of cancer or to prevent recurrence once they've survived cancer, because most cancer patients actually recur at some point in their life or it metastasizes somewhere else in their body. If we could prevent that cancer spread or cancer incidence, we would make huge strides in public health. CBD is really amazing at downregulating genes that are involved in cancer. So again, taking a daily CBD dose or pill as a vitamin might lower your cancer risk. It's anti-inflammatory, and again, so many good properties to CBD that I can't even list in this talk, but I use CBD personally as a vitamin every day, and it's something I promote, and I think that there's only going to be more research that suggests that it really should be included as a vitamin in our, in our kitchens or in our, bathroom pharmacy. So I hope that you consider CBD as a vitamin. Then finally, because I'm a woman and I have actually gone through menopause, I went through chemically induced menopause when I was treated for my endometriosis, even though I am a younger woman. I have gone through this, and I've seen how menopause is not a good thing. The treatments for it right now are pretty bad when you have hormonal replacement therapy, and in fact, many younger cancer patients can't even take hormonal replacement therapy or HRT later in life because if you're a cancer patient, these hormone replacement therapies will actually cause recurrence of breast or ovarian cancer. So we have this whole population of people that are now unable to use traditional methods of treating menopause, like hot flashes and bone loss and mood issues and a whole bunch of other things that are associated with menopause. Our population is only getting older, and in fact, we're going to have 1.1 billion women living past menopause globally by 2025. That's a good thing. We're all living longer, but now we're living longer in a different phase of our life than we used to. So more women are living 1/3 of their life past menopause. But we're really not thinking about their health. I mean, most women issues aren't, well researched or well cared about by public policy, at least in the United States. So when you're thinking about issues that women with menopause have, what if we could prevent all those nasty hot flashes and other issues of menopause by keeping people's endocannabinoid systems high and functioning well during menopause? And in fact, women that use cannabis during menopause have great management of their menopause systems. Menopause symptoms, and it actually goes away. And we also have osteoporosis prevention and treatment. And again, that's bone loss. We have older women breaking bones. What if you could keep your bones healthy by using cannabinoids? We also have that issue of sexual health, and the elephant in the room where we don't really talk about it, but what if we could keep our endocannabinoid system healthy and we have a good sex life until we're too old to be able to do it anymore, right? I want to see a life where we're healthy and we're happy all the way till we're in our 80s and our 90s, and I think that cannabinoid medicine can get us there. So I want to thank you so much for listening to my talk on cannabis as preventative medicine. And if you have any questions at all, definitely go look through more of the videos on this platform, or you can contact a medical professional or the Impact Network. Thank you so much. And again, this was Dr. Michelle Ross.